April 12th, 2022 board work session is now in order. Paul, roll call, please.
Ms. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Ms. Jenkins?
Present.
Ms. Campbell?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Present.
Please stand for the pledge. All right, during this afternoon's work session, we will be reviewing 3 policies for board discussion and or suggested revisions. We do not have public comment at today's meeting. The public will have the opportunity to speak on these items at the April 26th work session when they are brought forward for rule development and public hearing. We are going to start with Board Policy 0169.1, public participation at board meetings. Do any board members wish to discuss this policy and or make a suggestion for revisions? Ms. Jenkins?
Okay. So I have a question because we've kind of gone over this a million times, but after reading this revision, which I had no problem with, I agree with, I just don't really understand where we started and where we ended. So this process has started where a majority of board members wanted to revise this policy in order to kind of focus our board meetings back to what their purpose is to do our board business. And originally it was proposed to remove non-agenda items, and then it was proposed to keep non-agenda items, but then to take the cameras off. And then now we're proposing to extend the time again for those non-agenda items. Everyone knows I voted against originally the restriction of it, turning the cameras off. I wasn't for any of that stuff. But when I'm reading this now, this revision, I just don't understand why we're making it so complicated. If we're gonna go back to where it's equal amount of time or no more than one another or whatever, why are we not just putting it all back together in one spot with the tiered ranking system that we've created with the 1 to 10 speakers, 3 minutes, and so on? Because I feel like this is just super complicated for no reason. And I know how we got here because it was kind of like a circular process, but I don't see the value in them being separate.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Ms. Campbell?
Justin's the most recent revision for my suggestion. So I think one of the things that we wanted to do, first, just to clarify, the original policy that we had before we started on this process actually didn't allow for non-agenda speakers. Our original policy previous to October, whenever the first revision was, we just always did it. And so it was to clarify that, yes, we want to hear from people who are speaking off the agenda, but we moved them to the end. Cameras, no cameras, we worked through some of that as part that was the compromise. Where I think going back to this, we're not going back to where we were because we still have the tiered system. And what that, for me, does is keeps our board meetings running more efficiently. If we were to have, just think back to, I was running through some old board meetings, this board or something, ran into one where we had 100 and something speakers. That was a special meeting, so we could make our own rules. We made it 1 minute at a time. But let's just say we have a big night and we have 30, 40, 50 speakers. Previous to the change we've made here, that would have been 2.5 hours plus of public comment, right? It makes it harder for even the people who are waiting to speak. So having the tiered system of the 3-2-1 just means we can get through everybody. We could do like the legislature does and just say, we're going to hear this many people, we're done, or some other organizations, and that's it. Sometimes they get down to, you get 45 seconds or whatever their time limits are. But I think this, to me, this is reasonable to have it tiered so that if we can get through the business. I still think the idea of having them at different times is good because that keeps the focus on why we're here. And that is to take care of our business. And those things, to hear those people first and get the voting done. Then the non-agenda is still things that we're not going to address at that meeting that night. We still want to hear them. To me, adding this graduated time, going from 1 minute to potentially 3 minutes, and most of the time it would be 3 minutes, because we haven't had more than whatever I told you guys last time. I think we had one meeting where we had 12 people sign up for the non-agenda since we started the new policy. And so most of the time, it's going to be maximum of 30 minutes to people then, because we value what they have to say. And that's one thing we've been, some criticism we've dealt with, which I want us to hear, is that, we're only giving students, bus drivers, parents, whatever groups have come, that 1 minute at the end, and it's not a lot. And now that waiting till now, and kind of just, honestly, it was just seeing how things were going is why I brought this up and said, you know what, I think we should tweak this again. So our policies can be tweaked as often as we want because we own them, and we should own them. We're going to take ownership of them because it does fall under responsibility, but also because we're the ones who've had our hands all over them. So that's where I think we're going, so that we're not going back to where we were because of the graduated system. And I understand the confusion, and Paul did a great job writing out paragraph F, or letter F, under 2, A, little 2, F. Giving an example, because that was the part that was complicated. But I still wanted to keep my intention was to keep the agenda items as the ultimate importance, and so that people don't get more time to speak off topic than on topic. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I think you might have misunderstood what I was saying about going back. I don't mean that we're going back to where we were. I feel like we've almost came full circle in many parts of it. And so I agree with the tiered system because it does keep the focus on the board, on the meeting, the board business. I just think it's silly to have them separate, have this really explanatory clause of how one can't be bigger than the other. And to be perfectly honest, we really haven't had many speakers, right? Those scenarios where we had those meetings with hundreds of people are not every single board meeting. And it's true, we have people sitting here for an entire board meeting to speak on the non-agenda item. And so if we're constantly making these revisions because we feel like there's value in what they have to say, and they have the right to come here and say it, I don't know why we're keeping them separate. If we're going to put them on the same graduated scale, we might as well just keep them back together where they were and keep the graduated scale that we've created.
Go back just one more, and that was that before we put that policy in place, because of the number of people that we're having, we were already moving the non-agenda speakers to the end of the meeting before we put that policy. I don't know if you remember that for a few months when it got long. The chair, Ms. Belfer, would go ahead and just go through, and we voted each time to go ahead and put those at the end because we had so many. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of already doing that in practice before we wrote it down in policy. I hear you.
Right. When there were so many.
Right. When there were so many.
Ms. McDougal, Mr. Susan,
just a few things. Just a few. I like the graduated speaking. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And Mr. Gibbs, thank you for putting a little explanation in there too. I'm going to agree that non-agenda items should be at the end because I would like us to get through our business, and then people that want to speak to non-agenda items will be at the end of our business. I remember days when we didn't get through our business until maybe 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. So, and who's to say that that won't happen again? So I kind of would like the agenda items to be at the end, non-agenda items to be at the end. So I like how it is written.
So one of the things that when I look at it is we are creating a policy to reduce the amount of time that individuals are coming in, to reduce the amount of time that we are here as far as a school board. I am in favor of, like you said, moving the non-agenda down. That's good because it properly keeps it inside there. But I feel that the way that a lot of the movement through, whether you're on the right or the left, that there's a high amount of individuals that are coming in, and I feel that we should give them all the equal amount of time. So, I mean, I love the aggregate, the policy that we're sitting here where you first 10 and the second 10 and all that stuff. But for me, it's just the perception of we're trying to reduce the amount of time because we just don't want to be here that way. And I understand that that's maybe not what's going on here, but it's the perception that's outside in the community. The one thing that I would say is move the agenda down to the non-agenda items down, give them, get away with the 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, and let people speak. And if we're here for a couple hours, we're here for a couple hours, and we allow them each the equal amount of time to do so. The other thing I would love to do if we didn't do that, is to actually allow that if there's a board member puts up for discussion an item, that can be moved towards discussion item so that the individuals that are here, and mind you, remember, we put a bus driver agenda item on to discuss, and we had bus drivers that were out in the courtyard that were trying to come in to speak, right? And there was not an opportunity. They came in, they got 1 minute, and I think that's a disservice to our members. So if one of our school board members puts an agenda item up onto the discussion, that should be added to the 3 minutes that's given to the individuals that are part of the agenda item. And I was pretty consistent with what I've said in the last couple.
Can I ask Mr. Gibbs a quick question? Mr. Gibbs, if a board member puts something on the agenda as discussion item, that may not give the 2-week notice or,
Discussion items aren't being voted on.
okay,
That's why it's not a proposal before the board. It's just discussion.
okay,
That's why it is not in the agenda for the on-agenda topics.
okay, that's what I wanted to understand.
We made the exception for the information on policies.
Thank you.
But whether it's on the agenda item or not, Mr. Gibbs, it still is not a violation of law that we allow the individuals that we put a board discussion on to speak to that discussion, right?
No, you guys can certainly allow them to talk for 3 minutes if you wanted to. It's just not a proposal for the board that triggers statute.
Right. So we would not be in violation of anything. We would just allow.
I have a question. So, Mr. Gibbs, do we still have the ability in our policy to make the decision? Like, can we go back to where we had the ability to make the decision to move non-agenda items to the end of, and what would constitute that ability?
You mean like if there were a lot of people?
Mhm.
Yeah, you can always move to do it. I've left the flexibility in the policy so that if the board wishes to have any kind of maneuvering or extend time, whatever, then it can vote to do that.
So, for instance, if we put them back together, non-agenda and agenda, so that they're all being heard in the meeting, and there's some crazy hot topic where we have a lot of people that want to speak to a specific item on the agenda, we're going to be aware of it. We can make the choice to give those people time by
Yes.
removing the non-agenda.
Yes.
So I don't think it's just a perception that we're reducing the time here, because I really don't blame people who feel that way, especially because we keep coming back to the table, back to the table, back to the table with it. You know, we have people taking polls up here sometimes when we're going to leave, and people see that. And I just personally believe I agree with Mr. Susan. If it's on the discussion and there's people here to speak to it and they know that the discussion was happening, it didn't happen in the meeting, they should be able to speak to it. But the way to avoid that would be just putting the non-agenda items back with the agenda items and just valuing whatever's on there. Because I think the difficult part with allowing the discussion to be considered part of the agenda versus non, it gives power to school board members individually to make it more important than something else that someone has to talk about, and I don't believe we have that right or power. So in order to kind of meet in the middle there, I really think putting them back together would just kind of solve that problem automatically. And again, you know, when it comes to the tiered system, that was the whole purpose of coming to the table in the first part about this policy, which again, the majority of board members agreed to. I mean, not every governing body even has a 3-minute public comment, so we can't control how many people show up. And honestly, I feel like the last couple of board meetings that we had, we don't even, when you put them together, I feel like sometimes we haven't even gotten over the numbers. I don't know. I think it would make it easier. I think it gives people more of an opportunity to speak, to feel heard, to not feel that perception of making the meeting less transparent. And just kind of put some trust back into the community that we are transparent, we are listening, we are here to listen to them. I think it still serves the overall purpose, though, of focusing on board business by kind of reining it in a little bit. I don't know. I feel like we're kind of going in circles, and I feel like if we move forward with this the way it is, we're going to come back to the table again. I guarantee there's going to be, when it's put into practice, there's going to be a question of, well, is that an agenda item? Is it not? I don't know. It's just, I think this is complicated for no reason. And I think we should just put everyone back together and leave the tier system. and see how that goes.
Well, I have, we'll see where everybody wants to go on that. The one thing that I had question about, which may be a moot issue if we go in the direction that Ms. Jenkins is suggesting, is the verbiage on taking speakers in the order they are received, because we do have a little glitch with that if someone signs up for agenda comment, and then it's not agenda comment, and then I move it to the non-agenda comment, I'm no longer taking them in the order that it was. So,
Because you're bumping them to the end, and we don't know who's kind of first.
right, and so then, but depending on which way you guys decide to go on the policy, then that may be a moot issue, because then we would take them in the order they were received unless we moved non-agenda items to the end of the meeting. So I think that's an easy verbiage change.
Where's the part that talks about? Necessarily, I don't think that's necessarily written into the policy, is it? Just we've been doing in practice.
You can vote to change your policy, but it does say the time period may be extended by vote of the board.
Right, right. Well, and I think that's in there from when the policy used to say, we're only going to hear 30 minutes of public
Right.
comment, and we've always voted more. So just to address a couple things. I hear the perception about, it says about staying longer, but I just want to remind all of us that it's not about, oh, the board doesn't want to stay late. And I know the perception's out there, but the truth is it's all the staff who have to be here, right? And the people who are waiting to talk, because, how many times have we come to the end of that and, a couple of people who signed up, they've already left by then because it got late and they, didn't want to stick it out. And so, going to the shorter amount of time is not actually about at all the board getting home before their favorite show, whatever it may be, or before Chick-fil-A closes.
We have favorite shows?
Yeah, I don't know. What are shows? Who has time for shows? I think we do preserve the idea of equal time. It may be shorter time, but we do preserve the idea of equal time with the tiered system, because everybody, whatever the minute limit may be for the night, everybody's getting that same minute limit. So as far as the discussion item goes, I'm going to continue to object to that. And and not to say that someone on the board currently would do this, but we have to think about these policies outlive us, unless they're revised again. And they're potentially, we add discussion items all the way up to the day of, and sometimes during the meeting, that wouldn't be advertised, but if a board member the morning of emailed Tammy and said, hey, Tammy, can you put this on discussion for tonight? That has been our practice. Other boards actually don't do that. It's my understanding. Some of them, that like the chair and the superintendent have to, or they have a committee or whatever, what gets approved to be on the agenda, but we've been pretty flexible and open and collegial about that. We added on there. If a board member were to do that and then let whatever group know we're talking about it, but the other board members don't have, maybe there's another perspective and then only one perspective gets spoken. So I just think, I understand where you're going with that, but part of actually the night that the bus drivers came and they had to wait to the end, they only got 1 minute, that was something that was sticking in my, that was the only reason, but that was something that was kind of sticking in my mind before I suggested this change for us to go back so the non-agenda could get more time. I think that could lead to, I think it could be abused, honestly, just to be completely honest. And so, and I hear about the agenda, non-agenda. I am not hearing you, Ms. Jenkins, but I go back to what is important. And in the same way that what I just said I feel like could be abused, I feel like the non-agenda agenda could be abused, because if we have a bunch of people come to talk to us about something that's not on the agenda, and so all of a sudden now everybody's only going to get 1 minute, but someone came about something that we're going to vote on, that we by statute have to hear their input before we vote, then all of a sudden their time gets limited to 1 minute. To me, the priority is there of agenda versus not agenda. So that's, with the exception of what you just shared a little while ago as far as the time, I don't know what we need to do with that timestamp, whatever, where we put people to put them in the order that was received. think we can be within reason, honestly, because if you sign up for agenda and you're confused or maybe intentionally got off topic or whatever, and you get bumped. So, but I would, my preference would be just to stick with it as written.
Can I get clarification on the abused part? How would this be used to abuse? I heard it got thrown out a couple times. Just wanted an explanation if you can.
Sure. That's okay. I just think if a board member wanted, and like I said, I'm not saying one of us, but this outlives us. If a board member wanted to get a lot of things stirred up on a certain topic, they can let people know, hey, I want this, have everybody in this group, whatever group, come and bombard the school board member with this point of view, because I'm going to put it on for discussion, and it makes it agenda. I don't think that's fair, especially when there might be groups with opposing views or individuals with opposing views who didn't even know. So I just don't think that's a good idea and not a good look for us, especially with transparency.
So let me just follow up with that question to you, Ms. Campbell. If the opportunity was to abuse, the individuals would still be able to speak to the abused item. So if there's something that a school board member wants to put on, they could still put it on. They could still have people come speak to a minute. But the abuse comes when they're not speaking to a minute, but to 3 minutes because of time length. That's where I'm trying to find out.
No, I think it's putting it before the vote. It's, it was a bigger deal when we had the 3 minutes, the longer time for the agenda and the shorter time for the non-agenda. It was a bigger deal because then you're giving these people more time. If you say it's agenda, so now they get more time. But in the same way as it just shared, then that actually, if there's a lot, they could actually be taking away from time from people who came to speak on the agenda, something that we're going to vote on. Because then, now instead of 5 people speaking to an agenda item, now maybe there's 15 and everybody only gets 2 minutes. It's just priority. To me, let's just prioritize the people who are coming to speak to the agenda items. So, and again, it's not that putting something on the agenda don't get me wrong, putting something on the agenda for discussion is not an abuse. The abuse to me comes in when we're manipulating, when somebody, whether a board member or a person in the public, is manipulating the system to try to gain greater influence to one side or the other. That's where I'm going.
So I would say that the label of abuse or the argument that is being abused is based on the other school board members that may not follow that same vote, but just because they may not follow the same way or think the same way doesn't cause it abuse. And here's where I go, I think maybe I could do a better job of explaining the passion that I have for this. In order for somebody to come up here and speak for 1 minute on a topic, most of the time they're driving to get here no less than 10, 15 minutes, no more than 30, 45 minutes each way. Do you figure that individual in some cases has childcare, in some cases has family at home, in some cases does a lot of different things to get here, drives all the way here, passionately tries to give a 1 minute speech as opposed to a 3 minute speech, then drives all the way home? And for me, after I looked at it that way, I said, you know what? I may not agree with them. I may think that somebody puts on the agenda something completely ridiculous, and those people come and they speak for 3 minutes. But if somebody is willing to come here for 30, 45 minutes at a time, both ways, to speak, we could at least give them an extra couple minutes. And that's where my heart goes to those individuals. And I may not agree with all the topics. I don't agree with some of the ones that come up, but those individuals, I will sit here and look at them at the stand and give them their minutes. And I would passionately plead for us to give them their time, and I would passionately plead to allow board members that put up for discussion the ability for individuals to speak for that, for the 3 minutes. Because I may disagree with some of the stances of some of other board members, but anything that they feel that hot about to bring to the topic, I would honor the fact that anybody that came to speak to that, I would listen to.
I hear you. And the intention of the change is to give people more time.
So, we have, will you prefer to keep agenda and non-agenda separate in the policy? Wait.
Yes.
Just, you prefer to keep and non-agenda separate policy way.
As long as we get the 3 minutes on the back.
Can I ask or I kind of want to go off of what they were just talking about. Because I understand Mr. Sousan's position. If the discussion items count, he wants them to be, he doesn't mind if they're separate. Or am I wrong? I don't want to put those words.
No, I don't mind.
That's what I'm thinking.
I don't mind. Hang on, you asked for clarification. I don't mind if they're separated, if they give the 3 minutes.
So
that's all.
The reason I'm asking and making sure I'm not confusing where you're standing on this is because my perspective is, I think I agree with Ms. Campbell. Like, there could be somebody that comes along one day and does intentionally abuse it. I think that's an extreme case. Where I fall with it is I just don't believe individual board members have the power to decide what's more important to discuss that night. And so to eliminate that problem and confusion, but also provide the opportunity to speak as equally as an important agenda item, if we just put them back together with the tiered system, then we could potentially have people coming to speak on that discussion item earlier in the meeting, being heard sooner, and also valuing that discussion that will be happening later. I personally just think that's the simplest solution. The one thing that I'm a little nervous, never mind that I don't think we have the power as board members individually to decide what's more important than the other. I am nervous that it will cause more animosity for no reason in the community if it is perceived that somebody is doing it for that reason, even if it's not the intention. I think it's an issue for no reason for us to have. And so if we just put them together, it kind of solves the issue that Mr. Sousan is bringing up. And again, especially if it's something with it is our employees and they are driving here after work, they don't have to sit here, 2-3 hours to have their voice on.
So, I'll just throw a crazy idea out. I support moving the non-agenda speakers for all of the reasons about our ability to really focus this board. And to your point, Ms. Campbell, it's not about us getting out of here, at a reasonable time. But I do think that it's important for us to make sometimes challenging decisions while we are fresh, right? As opposed to sitting through 5 hours of public comment and then making really difficult decisions. Because sometimes it does get very complicated as we work through issues. But I wonder if there isn't a compromise between all of the things that have been discussed to say that we will take 30 minutes of public comment in the beginning, and if we have more than 30, with the tiered system that we have, right? If we have more than 30 minutes of public comment, then we will go to the tiered system for agenda item speakers and move non-agenda item speakers to the end of the meeting. And that way, yeah, so if we have, say it's not going to be in effect at tonight's meeting, obviously, because we're not through policy revision, but if at tonight's meeting we had 10 people, would be 30 minutes, right? Total, non-agenda and agenda. But so that would be 10 speakers. If we have more than 10 speakers, then it would go to the 2 minute, right? Because we have the tiered system in place. At most we would have 30, and then beyond 30 minutes, if we are going to go beyond 30 minutes of public comment at the beginning of the meeting, then we automatically move all non-agenda speakers to the end of the meeting. That eliminates, I think, strife both directions, because we could allow people to speak earlier in the meeting, but we would also have that caveat in there so that if we are heavy on speakers, they automatically, it's basically what we did before, but we would put it into policy and we would have the
I have a question.
So let me just throw out, just to make sure that I'm clear, we're all clear. I have it written down there somewhere. Okay, so if one night in December we had 8 total speakers, 3 agenda, non-agenda, so a night like that'd be less than 30 minutes. We could hear everybody up front. Back in February, we had a night where we had 17 total, 5 agenda, 12 non-agenda. So we would go ahead and hear the 5 on the agenda for 3 minutes each, and then we'd go down to 2, or
And then
everybody?
we would move to non-agenda.
So we would hear those 5 for 3, and then however many will fill the
30 minutes?
rest of the 30 minutes. But that's what I'm saying. Would the non-agenda people get 2 because there were 12 of them, or will they get?
And the way I understand what she's saying, it would be you take the total number and then
Everybody
you
gets two.
move. You have one tiered system, and then you're just separating the agenda from the non-agenda speakers.
So in that case, if we had 40 people total coming to speak on agenda and non-agenda, then everybody, regardless of what the split is, everybody gets one, and we'll hear the 30 people up front. And
Well, I think we could handle that anyway. I mean, I know, I hear the importance to you of prioritizing the agenda speakers. So I think that we certainly could make it such that the agenda speaker, you know, we look at the total number of agenda speakers and the total number of non-agenda speakers and break it down that way so that the agenda speakers, if there are fewer of them, are getting, you know, the 3 minutes to speak. I mean, I'm
right. I mean, right. If the breakdown of 40 people is 8 and 32,
right.
right, we're still 3 minutes each and 1 minute. That sounds more complicated than what out there.
It is, well, it
But
is somewhat
I do
complicated,
understand.
but.
I understand, like, for example, the meetings where we only had 8 people total, it totally would make sense to go ahead and just hear them all at the beginning rather than let those, because it's 30 minutes, right? And 8 people times 3 is 24. I mean, that's reasonable, to go ahead and fill in that time.
I just throw something out there.
The work sessions
So
are
what do
for-
we do? Yeah. So what do you, not we, it's you, you're the chair at this moment. So what are you gonna do if we have people come to speak to the agenda, and they do, and they get their 3 minutes? And then they come and speak to non-agenda, and they get 3 more minutes, but they actually continue to speak on agenda. So what, that puts you in a kind of a predicament there to either shut it down because it's not a non-agenda, or do you continue to let it happen? I just feel like, again, it's like these muddy waters that we're creating for no reason.
Well, that's why I say if we're within that 30 minutes, if we take them all in the beginning, people wouldn't sign up for an agenda and a non-agenda. They would sign up and say, this is what I'm discussing, right? And then during the time that they're speaking to the agenda item, if they're speaking to something non-agenda, it's still within their 3 minutes. We're just not going to address it.
I guess, but like, how would we manage that in the beginning, right? So they come to the meeting and they sign up outside.
Mhm.
They're signing up. Aren't they technically signing up on 2 different, I don't know, I don't even see the form. You see it.
Currently they are.
Right.
But we don't have to, we could still have them sign up as agenda or non-agenda because I get the topics that they're planning to discuss.
But like, what if we have 150 speakers one night? I mean, then you're going to sit there before the meeting and have to figure out who's who.
It was already doing that.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, they take care of that outside. They
Yeah.
determine who's agenda and who's non-agenda. So it would just be a matter of only allowing them to sign up on one form, not allowing them to sign up on both forms, I think.
Again, I just want to throw it out there because I feel like it's a muddy, watery situation for no real purpose.
So,
And potential angst and confusion, and, I just want to throw it out there.
Any change is going to have to be communicated clearly. Mr. Gibbs and I actually had this conversation, so I was like, I didn't want to muddy the waters. So the upside of just saying you just sign up once, right? And if you sign up for the agenda, but you also speak on non-agenda, you can just fit it in your 3 minutes or however many minutes you get. The upside to that is the chair doesn't have to play a referee and constantly, go, oh, you're getting off top. Just let them have the 3 minutes. So that's the upside. The downside is that, again, the potential for abuse. I'm going to sign up to speak on the agenda. I'm going to speak on an agenda item for 15 seconds, and then I'm going to spend the other 2 minutes and 45 seconds on non-agenda, which is going to, potentially take time away from other people.
Right.
So, and it would, at some point, there's not a perfect system, and the potential for abuse is always there. So I just, and here I'm going to say abuse. I don't want to, not like people are, whatever, gaming the system. But misusing, that's a better word, thank you. There's a potential for misuse. There's a potential for chaos. It all has to be communicated clearly. But if we were to go back, the problem that when Mr. Gibbs asked me about that is that I didn't want people to misuse it and talk for 15 seconds and just get more time. But if we put them, kind of squish them back together, then maybe that eliminates some of that. Because there is potential. Right now, people are speaking for 3 minutes at the beginning and 1 minute at the end. It could be 3 minutes and another 3 minutes. It's, whatever their priority is going to be. I don't have a problem with putting them back together within reason time. I think the point you make about being fresh it's one of those things we talked about, but I forgot that was one of the, good for us to remind mindful of that. I could do that. How do we make that less complicated than what we already have?
We leave that up to Paul to figure
I
out.
do have a question though about that, the 30-minute thing. So I understand what you're saying, but you still allow it to go over 30 minutes if there are more agenda speakers. Are you literally capping it at 30 minutes and everyone gets pushed?
We can't, we have to take anyone speaking on the topic prior to.
Right.
So,
So the wording's going to be a little fun because.
yeah.
I'll make it work if that's where you want to go.
It's the best.
Well, and okay. So actually, I'm not sure that that's quite accurate. That we have
That
to
Paul
take
is the
every.
best.
No. It's
No,
accurate.
yeah.
That's accurate. I'm
We
not
have
sure
to
that it's
have
accurate that
everyone.
we have to hear every agenda speaker because I think there's. Yeah, I think statute is just given a reasonable time, right? We have always done that, and I would definitely suggest it, but I would think if we had, for example, on agenda speakers, we had 40 or plus people, that we would, we could take a vote of the board to go ahead and make sure we hear everybody.
Right. I haven't heard anybody say we're cutting anybody off at any point. It's just separating the agenda from the non-agenda if we have more people.
Right. if
And
they
so
would go
that
over.
you don't have like 2 hours at the beginning. Maybe you got an hour on agenda topics and an hour at the end for non-agenda. I mean, I think I can work with that this way.
Okay.
Ms. Belford and Mr. Gibbs, it seems that if I'm understanding the proposal correctly, isn't the trigger as to what happens the number of speakers there are specifically on agenda items? Because if there is 10, then non-agenda item speakers are moved to the end of the meeting. If there's 30 speakers on agenda items, they all stay at the beginning, and then you use your 3-2-1. But if there is less than 10 speakers on agenda item only, then it could move people that are not speaking on the agenda up to the beginning. Is that right? I was just trying to get it straight in my head.
Yeah, so then you bring up a question of, say you have 9 speakers, but then what are you doing? Are you capping at 30 minutes, or then are you restricting certain speakers or giving a non-agenda item 3 minutes and everyone else not?
Nine's still within your 30 minutes.
Yeah, but what the
So-
non-agenda?
All right, I'm sorry. Let me, I don't know, pick a different number.
Yeah, I think
Do you get
that,
what I'm saying? It's
so
like-
if there's 8 speakers
Right.
with an agenda, speaking on agenda items, and there's 5 speakers for non-agenda items, do you hear 2 of the non-agenda
Right.
items in the first 30
You're not going
minutes?
to end in 30 minutes.
And if
Or do
there's
they all
20,
move to
then
do those 5
And
move to
then
the
someone
end?
gets more time than the other.
I think, so in my head, and maybe this clarifies, simplifies, I don't know. In my head, it would be if there are more than 30 minutes worth of agenda speakers, then all non-agenda speakers are moved to the end, right? So, but they would all get the same amount of time because it would be on the tiered system of how many non-agenda item speakers there are, the 3-2-1. Did that confuse or clarify? I think
No,
it confused.
I get what you're saying. So I guess so ultimately there really is a limit though to how many non-agenda speakers will be up. There would have to be some kind of a limit,
In the first 30 minutes?
right?
Yeah,
But if you
But they won't get more.
right,
because
they're
you're-
not going to get more time
even
than
if you
the,
have 10 speakers, you're going to have 30 minutes.
right. But if you have 30 agenda item speakers,
Yeah.
they're speaking for 1 minute, and so they're still going to fit in the 30 minutes. So it would be, we would just, if we exceed that time limit, then all non-agenda items would go to
Just as a couple of quick questions real quick. Just remember, we are writing a policy for this, for us, but then also for the public to be able to perceive and understand.
Right.
And if we're up here going back and forth about how it makes sense, you may want to think about how that looks to the public to try to make sense of it. That was my first thing. Second thing is that, so I just want to kind of clear this out. So we have a couple of points that we're getting through. Non-agenda versus agenda, time periods, if a school board discussion moves up to agenda item or stays down below, and then separation of agenda and non-agenda, which we had before. Those kind of the contentious things. I'm just trying, because we're like bouncing all over the place.
I know.
Yeah.
So right now, we are going through the non-agenda and agenda piece, right? So we're going to get to, are we going to go time periods, and we're going to get to whether the school board, somebody puts it up for discussion. I just wanted to have separate discussions on it, kind of bounce around. Is that kind of where we're going? So we have a discussion on this one, then we have a discussion on those three. So non-agenda, agenda, time period, and then school board member puts it up for discussion, whether you guys support that or not, and why. That's all.
So, to be fair, I think what you said last should actually go first, because you said for you, that's kind of like a clause and caveat for you that might kind of change what you prefer. So I think that's what we should probably go through first, what the majority of support.
It makes no difference on the pieces. That if we just have those three items that we're working towards. The other thing I was going to say is I'm just still trying to get down to the core of why we are creating all this confusion and all these other pieces. It is the fear of abuse and the staff's time that I'm hearing, right? That there may be somebody that abuses the opportunity to come speak, and then staff's time. Is there anything else that I can put up?
Everybody's.
Hang on.
Sorry, who coming to speak?
I think it's also about,
If I can just write them down as you guys go, so it's everybody's time, all right?
I think it's about equity overall, right? So, like, for me at least, like, I'm concerned about making this so complicated and muddy, just like Mr. Susan said. If we're going to have difficulty figuring it out, and we're going to have to sit up here and figure it out before the meeting even starts, I think it's really difficult for us to pretend that the public has the opportunity to understand. Plus, they can't even see that list. So that, you know, I feel like it muddies the transparency there. But for me, when it comes to looking at what's in front of us right now, I just think we shouldn't be muddying the waters. I think we need to make it really, really clear. And it's about equity of the speakers, too, right? We want to make sure everyone has the most time that they can possibly have to come speak to what they want to speak about. And so that, for me, that's priority now.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to thank you for the clarification. So we're on non-discussion, non-agenda versus agenda?
So let me ask something really quickly. Is there, are any of you suggesting that we move away from the tiered time?
I am. Sorry, but, okay.
The board member discussion item, is there majority support for moving that into our agenda item?
Can we have discussion on it? Is that okay? Instead of just, if I can talk real quick, I was trying to get to the why before I could get to an answer to it. But,
Okay.
Right now, everybody's come up and said abuse, staff time, everybody's time, equity, right? My argument for this is exactly what happened, is that our school bus drivers were coming in to try to give us a speech and try to talk to us about a topic, and they were deflated in the fact that they had to sit at the back of the agenda item and talk for 1 minute, okay? When I look back at the last 6 years that I've been on the school board, I will say that I can't even remember when somebody brought it up that I felt like it was abuse that they were bringing it up. I may not have agreed, passionately agreed or disagreed, but there was no abuse that I would feel that was brought up for that. The other thing is that the staff's time we can mitigate. We can mitigate the fact that the staff comes or doesn't come. We can ask them. I mean, if it's that, I mean, we only meet 20 plus times a year, all right? And out of those 20 plus times a year, we're only seeing 5-6 times that we really have these long, drawn out, past 8:30 meetings. And for me, those meetings and that time period, if you look at it, and it's been contentious lately, but we go through these cycles, right? Like you look back in history. I would say that those don't make up the fear of abuse, the worrisome for the staff time and everybody else's time would be less than allowing people who travel here to speak. And I feel truly that if a school board member, whether I agree with them or not, should have the opportunity to put it on discussion. And if people see that and want to come, then they should give input to that. Because that school board member may or may not be correct. And I wanted to speak to the one thing, which is one member having more power than the other. I understand completely where that may be a feel because we want to work together as a group. But when the agenda is set by the superintendent and the chair, we as a school board don't get to add things to the agenda per se because of the limitations. This is the opportunity that each individual has to bring it up. And it might be an agenda item that we want to hear discussion on, that each one of us wants to hear the 3 minutes on. And for me, if an employee comes in and can't speak for 3 minutes because of the rules and regulations that we've put in place because we're afraid of abuse, staff time, everybody else's time, I feel that that's a disservice to those employees. And I feel that that's the reason that I feel strongly about having the school board discussion moved up into the 3 minutes if we're going to be limiting time. So, thank you for giving me a minute.
Sure. I wasn't running the clock on you, though, Mr.
No, I know. Thank you.
No, so I understand where you're coming from. Part of my concern with it, in all honesty, Mr. Susan, is oftentimes discussion items are added at the very last. Very frequently, I get an email from, used to be Pam, now Tammy, saying, I have a request to add this for discussion at tonight's meeting. Is that okay? And I think that really makes it somewhat problematic, because if we are incorporating that into our agenda speakers and things are going on for discussion at the last minute, you know, as Ms. Campbell mentioned, the public doesn't really have opportunity to equally respond to that. So whereas our agenda is published 7 days in advance, yes, we typically have some adjustments to the agenda for various reasons. But I think there is enormous potential for an individual board member to really drive personal agenda in that. And so that quite frankly is my concern on that. Unless we are going to say the board will not add discussion items beyond 7 days prior to the meeting, but I don't think that's productive either, because there are things that come up that we sometimes need to have discussion about, and we're not taking action. They'll come back at a different meeting if we're going to take some action. But I think it is, I think it's touchy.
If I can respond, the only difference that we're making in this is the difference between the person at the podium speaking for 1 minute or 3 minutes. So the abuse, the opportunity for a board member to put an agenda item to drive that conversation, to have many people come, is still there. We're speaking specifically, and the only difference is the abuse is apparently coming from the extra 2 minutes that somebody would actually get in order to speak to this item. I would feel, that's all.
We're not leaving it at 1 minute. The
Yeah.
whole point of the revisions of this policy is to allow the non-agenda speakers to have more time. And the only reason why they'd go down to 1 minute would be if we have 30 or more speakers. And so that was the whole point of the revision, was to give people more
And I
time.
appreciate that, Ms. Campbell, but there is a stipulation that reduces the amount of time for people based on if there's more speakers, more time, and everything else. Am I not correct with that? Okay, so with that, if there's a night that our poor school, I'm just fired up over the bus drivers. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Them two sitting in the two bus drivers sitting inside of our courtyard got me, and I just passionately want to drive this thing home. Them sitting out there, because there was all these other people coming to speak about all these other things, right? They came here to speak about themselves, which is a part of our school district, and giving them the opportunity to do so. The difference between 1 minute and 3 minutes, just to me, was disingenuous, and I thought that I would fight passionately for it. That's it.
Which is why, and I appreciate that, Mr. Susan. I do want to clarify just a couple of things on the bus drivers, because I think there's been some misperception in the public. Number one, they still got to speak. We didn't stop them from speaking, unless they were not here to sign up to speak prior to the meeting starting, which is the policy always, right?
Capacity put them out.
Yes. So capacity is what put them outside. It had nothing to do with speaking time.
Sure.
But whether discussion is included in agenda or not included in agenda, we're still looking at 3-2-1 on the amount of time. And so if discussion is considered agenda or is not considered agenda, doesn't change that.
And I appreciate you moving in the other direction because of the notice, I do. You are 100% right, but let me clarify so that there's no misconception. There was a capacity issue that put 2 of our bus drivers outside. Where the passion comes from, and I apologize if that was a conception that was made based on my statements, the passion that I came from was the fact that when they stood there and they had this big speech, and they were coming in, and they had this big piece of paper, and there was, I think, 5 of them, and they were ready to speak, and then all of a sudden we said, you have 1 minute, because they hadn't paid attention to what the minutes are. They just thought they had 3 minutes. So they start getting ready to speak, and everything, it takes a lot to come up here and speak in front of this podium. And when they came up to speak, they were deflated because they said, okay, I got to get everything that I had in 3 minutes down to 1 minute. And it caused that confusion. So that's where I was at. And that dovetails into why the confusion of our speaker people who come in to speak, having a tiered system on the end of 30 minutes and everything else. People that are home are putting together their speeches based upon, well, I think I got 3 minutes. And when they get up there, it just kind of cuts them out. And I'll tell you, I think part of it is that them notifying us. But there's a part of public speaking that allows the individual to feel like they've been heard. And I think that when we go from making the minutes down from 3 to 2 to 1 and this and that, it kind of makes them feel like they had some more to say. Whether we want to hear it, whether we feel about abuse, whether we disagree or agree, I feel like that's where I hang my hat. So thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Sure.
May I say something?
Sure.
So I have I was writing down so that I don't lose my track. So I think something important for us to think about when we're talking about the discussion section and bringing up discussion items is that section, at least this is my perception of the purpose of it, really is like our non-agenda section, right, as board members. The reason we have a board meeting is because it has to be in the sunshine. There's things we can't talk about behind closed doors unless it's in the sunshine. And so that discussion area, yes, we can discuss things coming up and notify the public of stuff, but it also serves the purpose of us discussing amongst each other in the sunshine for the public to see. And so it's not the main purpose of that area isn't for us to bring it up so that the public can come speak on it. I don't disagree with Mr. Susan. I just don't think that's the main purpose of it. But what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Susan, and again, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I hear 2 different concerns. So one of them is the time for them to speak, but also the placement of when they're allowed to speak. And so again, I'm going to just reiterate, that's really why I don't see the purpose of separating them. If they're both going to be tiered anyway, the happy medium would be if they're together, then there's no more value placed on either side. And when it comes to the discussion he's talking about, that one was our staff members, and they had to sit here all day, and we avoid that now. That doesn't happen anymore. They come, they're here in the beginning. If their time gets reduced because we have so many speakers, it could have potentially been reduced in the non-agenda item area anyway. So why not eliminate that stress and that chaos and just put everyone back together and keep that tiered system? Because again, the original intention of revising this policy was to just kind of control the board meeting a little bit more and kind of get directly to the work that we're here.
Ms. McDougall or Ms. Campbell, anything you want to? Okay.
I'm just going to stick with, I want the agenda, non-agenda separate. I do think that's important, and I'm going to stick with the tiers.
Okay. So let me run through my list again. Mr. Susan, are you, well, I'll run through the list again. Okay, discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Belford, for going through this chaos. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So discussion being part of agenda, I'm not hearing that we have board support for that. Is that correct? Like officially considering discussion agenda? Okay. Time period. Is there anyone other than Mr. Susan that wants to move away from the tiered time period? Okay. Agenda, non-agenda. Paul, if we run with the policy like it is right now, and we have agenda and non-agenda separated. Is there anything that would stop the chair from taking a motion if we have 3 agenda speakers and 3 non-agenda speakers? Is there anything that would stop the board from making a motion to just go ahead and hear all 6 speakers at the beginning?
No,
Okay,
you just have to have a motion every meeting to do it.
okay. We did it the opposite direction, but I'm thinking it may be better to, instead of making a motion to move them, make a motion to include them. Does
So
that make
just-
sense?
So we have, in the policy that, Paul added in the last time, the above scale of time for public comment is deemed by the board to be reasonable. However, should a situation arise that the board believes additional modifications to the public comment times need to be made, the board may make additional adjustments with a majority vote of the board.
Right.
So I think that covers what you said. So we're not having 3 people wait to the end, no matter how many minutes. We can move it along. I'm in favor of I think, honestly, I think that would be simpler for us to start putting that in practice, than to try to, I don't know, if Paul's, or your wheels spinning trying to figure out how you get that in words, but.
What? What, with the 30 minutes?
Yeah.
You guys I have 2 weeks to figure, I have a week to figure it out before I have to have it on another agenda, so I'll
Well-
get it figured out before.
Well, but
it's
I
advertised.
think we can run with the policy the way that it is and just know that it will, like, I don't think we have to put it in writing that if we have 3 here and 3 here, we're just going to combine them. I'll just ask, or whoever's chair next can just say, board members, we have 3 here and 3 there. I'll entertain a motion to combine. Right, Paul?
Yeah.
And that keeps it a little,
Why didn't you
Cleaner?
say that at the beginning?
because I just
kidding.
had the epiphany, I don't
I'm
know.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. We bounce ideas off each other. That's what the whole point of being collaborative. And I will say again, even though we've had these long discussions multiple times now, that this is still one of the most collaborative policies that I've worked on in my 4 years. And it may sound a little silly, but we're not getting all hot and up and yelling at people, and not that we do that all the time, but working together, give and take.
Yeah.
And we own it.
Absolutely. So, are we good to move on to our next policy?
I'm not making any changes then?
I don't think so.
After all that, no.
All right, next is going to be Board Policy 2521, Instructional Materials Program. Do any board members wish to discuss this policy or make suggestions?
Yes. All right. Clock, how long do we have?
Not so much
I'm just
longer.
kidding. All right, I do have some questions, suggestions. First of all, thank you, Ms. Klein, and all the people who worked with you to make these adjustments. I was looking through the Neola. This isn't like on my computer where it's all like tabs and I can get there quick. The Neola recommendations, and it looks like with the changes that they made, they kind of gave an option 1, 2, and a 3 for how to do this. But I think we actually already had a more robust, first of all the work that we did a couple years ago, we already had a more robust system in place than what they're even now currently proposing, I would say. But there were a couple of options. There was one particular option that I wanted to ask about, and I'm still scrolling, sorry. Under option, and it's kind of down in the, let me see what page it's on page 38 in the computer, on the computer packet, but in the Neola version, there's a section, I'll just read to you because you'll know what it is. It says the material in question, and then we could have chosen may be or may not be withdrawn from use pending the committee's recommendation to the superintendent. And so that was kind of a suggestion, right? And then when I go down to our part, which for this is T3, whichever, oh my gosh, why am I, where can I get the menu? Oh, right here. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's causing me problems. Okay. That didn't. Where's all the red? Nope, it went. Sorry. Okay, T3, we chose, or you guys chose, and I know we can revise it, to go ahead and say that we would not remove them. And I know there's multiple processes. There's a little inconsistency, so I wanted to make sure that we make a decision as a board on that. And I have a suggestion. And then 2, oh, there it is. T3, challenge materials shall remain in use and shall not be removed until the following informal and formal due process procedures have been completed. So that was actually already in there. It's not red line, but that was what we already had. But then down on, okay, down below that, still T, number 4, B, 1, little e, number 6. Sorry. So 4B, 1, little e, number 6 says, the material in question may be withdrawn from use pending the committee's determination to the superintendent. So my question is, that sounds like it, my question is, at what point, or at any point, is it that it would be withdrawn?
Based on the findings.
So even before, it says pending, so it could be, so if the committee is going through the process and says, you know what, let's go ahead and pull it even before we're done and have the report sent out to the superintendent?
Well, the committee, which committee? School committee, this committee, the book would have to be read in its entirety.
Right.
Then that committee comes together at that point.
Okay.
But, Ms. Klein, if someone brings it to a principal at the school,
Exactly.
the principal can say, oh, we need to pull this now.
Yes,
And then does that end the process?
it does.
As long as it is that was one of the things that I wanted to ask. In each of these steps, whether, for example, in the 4A process, where where a book is at one school, or it's only being challenged at one school.
Correct.
If they get to the end of that process, that was a process that we already had. We get to the end of that process, and the decision is, you know what, it doesn't meet standards. We are going to pull it, but it says specifically that this only applies to that school. Is there any kind of flagging that happens? Because, for example, we have some books that have been put forward, right? And either only one school had it, so it sounds like it would go through this process, or by the time everybody went through it, only one school left has it. Then we go through the process. Is there any kind of flagging and follow-up or anything so that I'm trying to protect our media specialists or just make a note in there somewhere that, hey, if this comes up on a list of books that I might want to purchase, hey, there's a note in here that this went through a book challenge and it failed it, and so I better just double check. This one I may want to read. I know our media specialists cannot read every book in their collection. I know that they read a lot of them, but there needs to be some kind of just note of what has happened in the past. Even in the other points later on the policy that say, once we go through the process, this was in the 4B process, that it lasts for 4, or in the district challenge level in the 4A process, that it lasts for 4 years. Because then my question is, and then what? And then, is there still a note? Because then, here's where I'm coming from this, and it's been vastly misconstrued in some parts of the public, that this is a matter of our media specialists are doing a bad job. Let me just clarify. I do not think our media specialists are doing a bad job. I actually go from the assumption that our media specialists don't know that some of these are in here, and I think that has been borne out because some of them voluntarily pulled. I know some of them the principal made the call, but some of our media specialists come into a collection with thousands of books, and they've only been there for a year or two or less. And some of them, I know have been there for a long time, and they're their collection like the back of their hand. But that's where I'm starting with. To me, I know this has been such a contentious issue, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It can be a partnership where the public comes and says, you know what, hey, this here's a concern, and we can take that and go through our process, which we are putting into, adjusting in the policy here. But again, I think part of that to be good stewards of this, going through that and our responsibility, I think we need to have at least some kind of annotation made that says this book either survived or did not survive a challenge process. I talked to one of our media specialists last week, and who had a conversation actually with some of the heads of Follett, and asked them, hey, what can you do? They were asking her, what can we do better to help support schools? And she made some suggestions about them kind of giving some more data. Like, if a book, I know sometimes it's in there, if these were award-winning books on the national level, could they put what state awards, how many state awards did the book list? Because that kind of helps them get an idea of the qualifications of the book. Could they, put that it's mature topic or whatever? So that's on them. But I think on our end, if there's a way for us to market so that we don't have to go through all of this again in 4 years because someone, it just got added to the collection, or it just got challenged in one school and it failed the challenge, but then yet another school turns around and buys the same exact book, and then here we are all over again. I'm not sure that that's an efficient use. I know one of the reasons why we're doing this was trying to make a more efficient use of our staff time and our committee's time, and I'm not sure that that's an efficient use of time.
I can put a note in there about
Is there any, and I had Tammy make these, so I'm going to pass these to you. For your bedtime reading, will you pass one of those, Paul, please? 1, 2, 3, 4. I asked Tammy to make copies of some statutes for us. 847.012, which is about harmful materials. I've read that one before. 847.001, which has the definition of some of the pornography terms and harmful to minors. 1006.40, which is the use of instructional materials allocation, and instructional talks about the process. And then 1006.28, which has duties of the district school board. And I just want to highlight this because one of the things that has been said is that this is the opportunity for one group of parents or one parent to make a decision that's going to affect another group of parents. And the truth is, that's neither here nor there. There is one entity who is responsible for the materials in our libraries, and it's us. If you look at 1006.40, it says each district school board, not the superintendent, not the parent committee, the school board is responsible for the content of all materials used in a classroom otherwise made available to students. Each district school board shall adopt rules, and then each district superintendent shall implement procedures. And again, in 1006.28, it says the same thing. Each district school board is responsible for the content of all instructional materials and any other materials used in a classroom made available in a school library or included on a reading list. And so this is our prerogative. And I would say, if there was anybody who would go with me, that even though I know Paul and I had this conversation about the 3-prong test of harmful to minors, and that's why the Supreme Court won't call things out. And but this is our district, and these are our policies. And if we wanted to add in that if there is a specific challenge, and this would be my recommendation, if the challenge is pornography in particular, that we do go ahead and pull it, and pending the committee's decision. I know there's some other things could be pulled. Hey, we don't think this is historically accurate, or whatever other reasons people might have. But and the reason why I say that is, if you look at these statutes and half a dozen more, that 847.012 is all over it. That is the one thing that says, okay, it has to go along with the standards and all that, but it also can't have the things that are in 847.012. And so it's so specifically and so frequently mentioned in statute, I think it would behoove us to go ahead and make that adjustment, that if the challenge is because of pornographic content, then along with whatever form they have to fill out, that we do go ahead and pull those pending the committee's decision at whatever level, that once we get to the formal processes.
Mr. Gibbs, do you have any concerns with that recommendation? I'm guessing not, since Ms. Campbell indicated you guys had already talked, but I just feel like I need to.
I don't
know
have,
if I talked about that part.
yeah, and she didn't talk to me. Yep. She didn't talk about adding that kind of a caveat in there for 847.012. But ultimately on the 847, to satisfy those standards, it all goes back to harmful to minors, and it's kind of a circular argument. So you're always going to end up at the end of the day under 847 having to review it under the harmful to minors statute, and that's kind of where we were. It has to meet all three prongs to be harmful to minors. I mean, if it meets that and you've got a case that does meet that and the book's pulled, then certainly it shouldn't be anywhere else.
But what I'm suggesting is it doesn't have to, we don't have to go there. I mean, we can say.
Yeah, the school board sets that
right,
can say we don't want certain
we're
books
not
in your
held
thing.
by
There's
that to-
nothing there.
Right, allow things. And, and you brought up that, talked about, I think the third prong of that is it has to.
The
know,
entire
just-
work has to have no literary, artistic, or
Even
any other
political.
value. Yeah, political value to the
Right.
student
No,
as the third prong. That's your really heavy prong right there.
And so the thought is, if it's otherwise, has good educational value or whatever, I think it says significant. Looking for the right page. Serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors. That it's the whole book is this, but on one page it has this, that you don't toss the baby out with the bathwater. I understand the argument there, but I would also say that the reverse is true, that just because it has a little bit of scientific, artistic content, but a lot of the other stuff wouldn't make it appropriate to be on our shelves either.
I'm not saying that the board deems it appropriate. I'm just saying it doesn't rise to illegal content.
In a legal challenge, and so that's what in a
So
legal
the school
challenge.
board can set what parameters around what books it buys. That's fine. But under the 847, which is a criminal prong there, it's not going to rise to the harmful to minors. It's a heavy burden to get there.
Right, I get that, and I don't, certainly don't want to worry about our staff having to be, taken to all the other provisions where, complaints are filed with the state attorney's office and all of that. I just know that this responsibility weighs heavily on me. It is our responsibility to make sure that the materials are appropriate. And we're not talking about a parent coming in, a similar situation would be, and saying, you know what, in our house, we don't let our kids watch movies that are above rated G. And so telling the school, and then the school has to kowtow to that and say, oh, we're only watching G-rated movies when we show a movie, which we don't show movies all the time, right? It doesn't have educational value. This would be like, we're talking about NC-17. We're not talking about PG and G. We're talking about NC-17. And if you don't know where I'm coming from, you didn't read the excerpt. So I'm sorry to get all, but I want you to know my heart on this is that this is our responsibility. And I understand the legal, but we're not talking about going to court. We're talking about what we choose as a board to allow. And I'm asking, just to clarify, and Silver had to walk out, but I'm asking if there is consensus, and if there's not, we'll deal with what it is as it is. But is there consensus to make that specific, narrow challenge that if it's about, material that would not be in line with 847.012, the plain reading, not going to the Supreme Court reading, that we go ahead and pull it pending the decision of the committee?
And that portion, Paul, do you feel like there's anything problematic with pulling it before it's actually reviewed?
The board can do that if that's where it wants to take its policy.
So Ms. Campbell, we had lots of discussion in our previous policy about abuse of or manipulation of the system. And I absolutely understand where you're coming from on it, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. But I do think that we're asking ourselves to just have every book be argued that it's pornographic to ensure that it's pulled off right away. And we can have discussion. I'm not digging in on it, but I just think we have to put that in our head.
And I look at I try to look at all the sides of the things, and I know that there's
Right.
someday there's going to be a book that is challenged because it has too conservative of a viewpoint. Maybe it's just throwing it, while we're having the lively discussion. Maybe it's Donald Trump's autobiography, and somebody has a problem with it. That could be challenged, right? That's why I wanted it to be narrow, because we said it's already in the policy. I think it was added in that we're not pulling things because it's against someone's. Actually, no, it's in the red line version. No challenge material may be removed solely because it presents ideas that may be unpopular or offensive to some, right? But 847.012 goes beyond what is unpopular or offensive to some. And I just have to say it again every time that I can, because again, it's been so misconstrued. We're not talking about books on history. We're not talking about books on race. I haven't seen any of that yet. Maybe they're coming later, I don't know, but not any of the book challenges that we've sent so far. It's all been about this kind of highly sexualized content. And I take offense at people who say, oh, well, the Bible talks about sex. Yeah, buddy, it does. And I've read it through several times. It does not give moment by moment, body part by body part, escalation. And I'm sorry, that's as far, it's a workshop. We don't have as many kids watching. That some of this material does. So, I don't know if there's any movement on that. I hear what you're saying, but I think under that circumstance, I would just ask. And I said, I'm asking if there's not consensus, and I'll, I yield.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm talking for the rest of you guys. Is there anything that, we said that if it's at the informal process, if it's brought to the principal can say this needs to be pulled if they feel like it's within the realm of that pornography, right?
Correct.
So if it's a district level, couldn't the assistant superintendent also?
So I'm going to let Dr. Sullivan speak, because we certainly are going through this.
So I want to go back to the previous statement you just made. The informal process is for a discussion with the parent in the school. And so that discussion may be appropriateness for a wide range of reasons. I don't want to limit it to the discussion on like the statute. That's not, I would, there's a lot of agency and organizations sort of labeling, the books for schools and things like that. So at that informal stage, age appropriateness as well as other content issues or different issues are frequently discussed. And I would say that that informal process over the years has been in place. With the district process, what we've outlined, what our recommendation for the new language on multiple titles, multiple schools also includes an informal process, which is what you're seeing happening right now. That we, like any other parent concern or any other community concern, I liken this to you all know the many calls a day I get on various issues. We bring it to the principal, we bring it for their review, we bring the information for their consideration, and they work with their media specialists, they consider the different issues, and then they make those decisions. Sometimes it's a matter of the book was actually lost, right? So in some cases, when a book title is brought, they went to the school to take it off the shelf and it wasn't there. And I'm using the word lost generously. And so the book is no longer there. There's different issues that have occurred in some of the ebook access. When we brought the issue to a school, the ebook was actually expired already. So for a variety of different reasons, schools and principals and media specialists working in partnership with the information are making decisions that make sense for them. So I'm trying not to just be specific about these requests that we've brought, because again, we look at any parent request, any issue, any discussion, any title, any topic for whatever reason. So we've advocated for that informal discussion first, and which is what we're doing in good faith as it parallels the solo school version. We felt pretty confident as we handle any other parent concern to bring that concern to the school for their review and evaluation. And that's occurring organically right now. In one of the titles, the publisher actually changed the recommendation, so we sent that out to the school. They changed the recommendation. As before mentioned, there were thousands upon thousands of titles. And so as new information is brought forward, we share that for schools to consider and to review. So yeah, that informal stage is really occurring right now, and would occur with any complaint that we got, honestly, about anything. We would bring it to the people involved and let those conversations happen. I don't know if I answered your question. We're trying to create a policy, as the board has asked, to withstand time, to withstand individual topics and individual moments in time, but honor the feedback of our parents and community members while also honoring the professionalism of our staff. I think we can do both of those things, and get to some positive resolutions by doing both of those things. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Board members, other?
Well, I will say something. I just want to make clear to the public too that most of, if not all of these ones that you presented to us, since they can't see the papers, the statutes are numbered in the policy if people are questioning what you were talking about. And specifically 847.2 is, I don't know, forget it. There's too many letters. There's too many letters.
It's right there in the red line.
My concern with making it specific like that is just, again, I think we're muddying the waters. We're muddying who makes that decision of what exactly pornography is, because even in this statute, it's widely explained and broad, and it's already in the policy. That statute's referenced in this policy. It's part of the process. It has to meet that threshold and that standard. So there already is that check and balance there. And I want to say one thing. You did say that there's a perception that you're putting down media specialists, but just as a board member with you, I don't personally believe anyone up here thinks that. I don't think anything you've said when we had previous discussions even alluded to that. So if you're hearing that, it's just a minority of voices, and I don't think our media specialists feel that way. I think it's more than reasonable for people to understand, and our media specialists to understand, that you don't think they're actually reading every book that's inside of their library. So don't own that.
Ms. McDougall, any?
I don't have any further comments. The statute's in here in our policy. I think that's where it needs to be. I don't think narrow it.
Mr. Susan, anything from you?
Nope.
So then, can I go back to the question? I don't think Ms. Klein already answered that. Can we add something about just that the results of any challenge, whether it's a school level challenge or a district level challenge, can be noted somewhere in the system, even if we have the 4-year expiration, that it's just. Okay. And then, so it doesn't have a letter, but right before you.
I'm there.
So many numbers and letters. Right before you, so find you first and go up the 2 paragraphs before that.
That's why I gave up.
Yeah. I was trying to read them slowly so everybody had time to find it. 2 paragraphs before you, it says, no challenge material may be removed from the curriculum or from a collection of resource materials except by action of the board, and no challenge material may be, okay, so that phrase right there. But we've just said, so I guess this question is to Mr. Gibbs. Because that sounds confusing if we've just said that our media specialists and principals are already making some decisions in collaboration, right?
Ms. Campbell, if I could mention that we've not received a form of challenge materials.
Okay.
So we have not received a completed form on any of them at this point. And
Okay.
so the way the policy is written is if after that informal process, the requester is dissatisfied still, then it kind of goes to the next step. And in our current policy, it would be after that informal, then the parent would complete the form, and that would trigger the process. This is it. We're in a weird space because of the no policy on multiple titles, multiple schools. So the same thing would happen. The requester would complete a form. And we have not, so I think our perspective has been the challenge material is triggered
Once
by that
the
form.
Okay.
I'm not saying we're right. I'm just saying that's been, however the board wants to clarify that interpretation is obviously okay, but it matches the Neola language and the recommended language we've seen in the other stuff. So we haven't received a completed form yet.
Gotcha. So I just wanted to make sure because it sounded like that was contradicting what we were saying up in the other part, that it can be removed if in the informal processes. But you would saying, and as long as it's an informal process, then it wouldn't necessarily be defined as challenge material.
Right.
Okay.
And again, we had some good examples would be in our junior seniors and making sure maybe some content that's appropriate for high school is different than the middle school. Some of those just informal navigating circumstances are.
Okay. And I see the informal process says a request for reconsideration. So that would not be necessary. Okay. And then,
Ms. Campbell, can I just talk about that?
yeah.
I think that how I read that whole paragraph, because you stopped at right before the and. It's no challenge material may be removed from the curriculum or collection of resource material except by the action of the board, and no challenge material may be removed solely because it presents ideas that may be unpopular or offensive to some. And then it goes on, any board action to remove material will be accompanied by the board's statement of its reasons for the removal. So I think taking that one sentence out of context there doesn't contradict. I think it was just clarifying why or why not we wouldn't take things out of the collection.
So, but how does the statement, how does the statement of the board, how does that work its way into what because our action by the board doesn't necessarily mean that book is going to ultimately come to the board and we're going to vote yes or no. We are taking action by the board by creating this policy and having this provision that the district, like this, what's right before that paragraph, the district material review committee decision is final. We each get a representative on the committee and all of that. So this statement by the board of its reasons for removal would be the decision of the committee. Okay. And then the next, the last paragraph before you, the board shall discontinue use of any material challenge in this policy if it contains content that is, then there's 847.012, inappropriate, and all the other things, and that comes straight out of one of these statutes. Ability to comprehend, inappropriate for the grade level, all of that. So, but then just that 4-year, I think the 4-year, is that only in the district-wide, the district level? It's in the original too. Okay, so again, another place where I would, at least in procedure, if we can just have a note that any challenges will be noted for future, for the good of our media specialists, so they would have all the information available to them. We don't have to go through this whole process all over. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to ask. Ultimately, it's in here for those committees, the district level committees in both the 4A process and the 4B process, or, right? But that it says, these are the statutes, but can we make sure that in the training or in the materials, whatever we hand to, like when we do instructional material, like state adopted, we give the review committee, here's the kind of the rubric, here's the statute, here's whatever. I think we need to have that kind of material so they know what they're looking at. I'm just not going to subjectively, I mean, it is subjective, but I'm going to have some criteria that the state looks at. Mm-hmm. It just didn't have well, I guess it has 7A says does not meet, or it does it in the determination. So I guess that, yeah. So, and 1006.28 has those in there. Let me pull it up really quick for myself, sorry. Yeah, it does. It has all that criteria. Not suited to student needs, inability, comprehend the material, inappropriate, and it also has 847.012. Okay, all right, thank you. That's it.
Anybody else? And chaperone extraordinaire. Miss Slack and I were together at the Morse for this week. I don't know. They're all running together recently. So, and I may have missed it when I stepped out, but what is our reasoning for the 4-year? So then we would need to do this all again in 4 years?
Well, is it, so let's say a book is challenged and we decide that, okay, we're keeping it. So then they have to wait 4 years before they can challenge it again. Is I understanding? Yes. So have we, any book that was challenged and we've moved, have we ever put it back in the system? Okay.
I could be like, I'm beyond speculating here, but I can assume maybe that number originally maybe came from the mindset of it was probably coming from a parent at a school, and within 4 years, likely their student no longer is at that school.
I never thought of that.
So it's probably where that number originally
Never
came
thought
from.
of that.
Oh, thank you for, I'm glad you brought this point, because there was something else in here that I think might be maybe it's a typo. In the old, sorry, I'm playing with this and to move it up here. In the part that we created a couple years ago, it says, with the 4 years, it says, and if it goes past the school level and it goes to that district level committee, right, it says the 4 years and affects the district. Down in the new part where we've talked about district-wide challenges, for some reason, at the end of that, it says the determination is valid for 4 years and affects only the participating school. Okay.
I'm giggling because I literally just passed her my paper and said, oop, that's a mistake. We need to fix that. We literally just had that moment.
Thank you. Like, if we're going to go through all this process for district-wide, it needs to say the same as before. So thank you for taking a look at that.
I would, from our end, request a little bit more clarification on the 4 years, because I agree that the interpretation was that if the book was supported to remain in circulation, that the requester, that we would not do the same thing the very next year, not that we would return the book in 4 years.
Can we
So on
clarify
the,
that somehow? 'Cause
that's
that
what I'm
seems
asking. That's why I'm
ridiculous.
asking you not to leave that yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Be-
So I don't know, because it cuts both ways, right? Because at the time when we were making that, I think you're right. We're not, someone can't challenge it this year and then challenge it next year and challenge it the next year and then, but the way it's worded, it's cuts both ways. It looks like, okay, we're only keeping it off the shelf for 4 years, and if somebody wants to put it back on, and then somebody has to realize that it's back on, and then we have to go through this process, and somebody put it on their Google Calendar to remind them in 4 years to go and change, and then we have to go. So if it fails a challenge, it's gone through a pretty rigorous process, it needs to be done. We're never ordering that one again. But I don't know.
unless we define some process for visiting a challenge.
So I was
And
gonna
that sounds really messy too.
I was just gonna say though, is when you think about it, like where we are in giant doc, this is being used to challenge and potentially remove a book, right? Like this isn't being used for the opposite. This isn't being used to say, I want this book back on the shelf. So I think the intention of the 4 years is clear so that it can't be re-challenged.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I requested for us to flag them or put a note or something, because
Right, which
if
makes
someone
sense.
wasn't here 4 years ago and they order a book because it's just in a group of books and there's no way of them knowing, oh, I might be stepping into a hornet's nest, there at the very least needs to be a notation. If Dr. Sullivan is asking us, what do we want to do with that? Do we want to make it permanent? Then I would say yes. If it survives this process, the only change would be, not to make it political, but we have 5 members of the committee are represented by the board, and every so and so years we get a new makeup of the board, and we could potentially have a shift.
Well, and I think also you have to consider too, like the community, the population, the students that are being served in that school, the representatives that are on that committee might drastically change. I don't know, I just think that's something to think about. Not to say that it wouldn't get challenged and fail again.
Right.
I would recommend that we be specific on what was probably the original intent, meaning that it doesn't get re-challenged. However, that leaves a space for clarity around like the length of once it's been upheld to be removed, right? I think we can be really specific that if it's been upheld to remain in this school, that we won't redo that within 4 years. And just use more specific words in what we all infer was the original intent. But I do think we need from the board a subsequent bullet, if you will, on the length of that and the intent for future boards to be able to revisit it or not. I think, for you guys to give us that to put in there is kind of my. Yeah.
So there's 7A and 7B right above. The easiest way is to go to you and then back up. 7A and 7B. A is the one that says it does not meet it, and the school shall discontinue. I think that needs to say the district, but that's what we're talking about. The district shall discontinue, and then affects the whole district, right? So that would, for me, we just leave it, discontinue the use of the material. I don't think we could take off this, if the board wanted to, we could take off the sentence that says the district material review determination is valid for 4 years and affects only, or we could just say the district material review determination affects the entire district and take the 4 years completely out. And then B says that it does meet the criteria and the determination is valid for 4 years and again affects the entire district.
Had a moment while you read that out loud as well about the 4 years. It may also have been originally written because of the terms of school board members as well. just to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying.
And
Doesn't
whatever-
solve the problem
Whatever
or
we
answer their
decide, it needs
question.
to be consistent between the school level challenge with the district appeal and then this one.
So I have a question. So do you, okay, I'm just going to ask a question and then you answer it for me. So a book is challenged, it's removed. Currently, right now, as it's written, what is stopping it from coming back? The statement about the 4 years? Okay. So it goes in both directions right now. Okay. That's what I assumed, but just want to make sure.
I would just interject, because we've never had it happen, I don't know that we know what we would have intended.
Thank you, that's what I was
In either direction.
Yeah. I really was just kind of thinking out loud. I
Yeah.
couldn't let it go.
So, but we're all clear on the fact that we don't want a re-challenge every year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That, like,
Right.
there's no question on that. So then where we have question is,
What number do we like? Or enough.
or
Indefinite.
Most of these books I've been too long, I have to go back to what we were, but I do get continuous.
right.
Well, if I could interject, I think we need to clarify that it would be, the length of time is it would be removed and not considered for repurchase before a period of time.
Right.
We got to be careful that we're not suggesting that it's removed for a finite period of time and then it will be put back on a shelf, because ultimately that would be an administrative management challenge, in my opinion. It would be a media specialist couldn't reconsider reshelving that book or purchasing that book before and would use the same review process they use now in evaluating whether or not that's an appropriate book for the shelf. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
If in fact the board wants to consider a length of time until which time a media specialist could give it reconsideration. And the board could to determine that it is pulled and no longer eligible for reconsideration.
I'm going to get the ball rolling here. I'm comfortable with 4. That doesn't bother me.
So after 4 years, it could be considered for repurchase?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, what's the likelihood of that happening? I mean, it's slim. I mean, if it happens, then there's still the process in place where it can be challenged and removed if it's deemed to be challenged and removed. I mean,
I think the difficulty lies in, we are saying that a book is being removed because of its match to state law and like established criteria and matched for the bad, right? And so it would make me nervous, because 4 years might seem like a long time. In our world, is not a long time with the length of our careers and things.
Right.
So it would make me a little nervous to just say this ends and then, so I don't have an answer, but maybe we'll ponder. Because
That's kind of where I'm from, is if it's gone through the process and it is removed, pretty rigorous process, and a lot of people, I think the committee is 9 people, 11 people, stacking it up to the standards of statute, I don't see any reason why it would be appropriate to add it back.
Yeah.
I guess the only argument I would make to that is it's not 15 lawyers evaluating it and holding it up to the value of the statute, right? I mean, it's a
Right.
really good mixed bag. I'm not saying that. I'm not putting that down by any means. But I also think it's kind of unreasonable to not potentially allow, as time changes, again, the population changes, community you're serving changes, to not potentially allow for it to come back and be revisited by a different group.
Might I suggest that a requester in the future could request the process to reconvene after X amount of years, and then a committee's relooking at it. So somebody could have to take an affirmative action to reconvene after X amount of years, and then to Ms. Jenkins' point, to everybody's point, really, again, perspectives change as well, and so that somebody could, in the affirmative, request a reconsideration after X amount of years and follow the same process.
But then wouldn't there have to be a process in which the request to put it in is happening?
That's what I mean, literally
Yeah.
follow this. It's the title is reconsideration, right? So perhaps we take that on both ends to reconsider. So just like we wouldn't reconsider an acceptance of a title for X amount of years, once a title has been removed, we would, if somebody wanted to do an affirmative reconsideration in the other direction.
You're talking
Just
about,
giving you guys some thoughts.
Yeah, and that's where I was going when I said unless we have a process in place for it to be revisited later. Although I was envisioning it being like a whole nother nightmare of a process to create, but I think you just nailed it, Dr. Sullivan. You just simply have a form for a request for reconsideration, and that
Use it the
everything is
other
there.
direction.
Yeah.
I guess, like who do we see doing that though, right? Like it really would only be our media specialist, because
No, it could be.
yeah, I don't know.
But it's because you're considering the list in front of you right now.
Right.
But the list could, books that are widely considered to be of tremendous value, right? And so it could be in the reverse of that. Societal perspectives change greatly over the years.
I guess it's hard to envision because we don't have
It
right
is,
now.
exactly.
So it's kind of weird to envision
It's
somebody
very
coming back to the
strange,
table.
but just allowing the reconsideration process to go both ways might solve.
I like that. Are you
Me
guys
too.
good with that?
Yeah. Do we want the same number, like it reconsider after 4 years, or do you want it longer, or what do we want?
I like my made up excuses as to why the word they seem pretty sound.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just asking.
I came up with two.
Right.
I hope,
The only reason I might suggest a longer period of time is, I mean, we could be facing the same, this is one thing the board has not discussed, I know you're very aware of, and I'll take this opportunity, is the amount of time that is going to be required to do this process. It's not weeks, and it's probably not even months. The number of titles that have been submitted for challenge is likely going to take at least a year to get through, given the number of titles and the demand on, not the least of which is staff time to manage this process. And I believe, just to echo Ms. Klein's sentiments of Ms. Slack, our media special, one media resource teacher for 70,000 students, 85 schools. So she's very, very, very busy person. But all of that aside, in 4 years, we then don't need a list submitted to reconsider any number of books that have been removed. I think a longer period of time, if we're going to go through the rigors of removing a book, then it should be 8 years.
Decade. 10 years. Everything changes by decade, right?
I personally, I'm not for extending it. I think putting the least amount of restriction on these type of things is important. I think if we come from the perspective of it's being challenged probably by someone whose student has access to it and it makes them uncomfortable. I don't know. I think extending it is not the best idea. I understand that it is a long process, but the 4 years would then start once that process is over, correct? It's not going to overlap. And again, I don't know. It makes me concerned when we're restricting things in the first place, and I think putting more time on it is an unnecessary extension of that restriction. Again, because realistically, I don't know how often or likely we will see someone coming back to the table trying to put a book back in that was taken off. I don't know how realistic that really is.
Well, I would also,
Then again, I guess it goes
yeah.
the re-challenging,
Yeah.
but that's just.
So we're writing a policy for kind of a new experience. And much like our revisions to our public comment policy, we can always make revisions on timeline again. I would tend to go along with Dr. Mullins on making it a longer period of time. And I mean, we can always revisit or the next board, whoever is here, can revisit the policy if we find that there's a situation that arises that there needs to be reconsideration. Because the staff time is incredibly concerning for all involved, everyone. And then you could always shorten it back if found there was a reason to.
I do want to follow up with this thought. If we can take a moment to think about how many emails we even got on this so far, it's not many. I understand there was a list that was lengthy, but I hesitate to continuously restrict something that hasn't necessarily been brought to our attention more than it already had. How often will this happen again? What is the likelihood of it happening again over and over again? I don't think we can predict that. So I agree with you, and I hear you that we could revise it. I believe the better thing to do would be put the least amount of restriction on something, and if it becomes an issue where it's happening too often or causing too much trouble for our staff, then we would hope that the policy would be revised to increase the. I think going backwards would be a weird scenario.
If the movement of the board is not to go with my suggestion of permanently removing, then I would prefer 15 years, 8 or please.
Your mic's not on.
Quite frankly, I'm not for 8 or 10 years removal, but at the same time, I don't think we're going to get a whole bunch of people knocking down our doors to reinstate a book. I'd be very surprised, because those people will have been gone. Their children will be gone from our school. But when we restrict something so much, I get very nervous. So I could do 5 years. That would work, but 8 or 10, no.
Susan? What do you mean you're good?
That
Or-
wasn't a yes or
What do
no
you like?
question.
The way Dr. Mullins wants it, I'm good.
The way Dr. Mullins wants it, so you support 8?
8
I
years.
just suggest
So 8 is what you,
So I guess, so say it's 10, right? Like what scenario would cause the board to come together to revise the policy to reduce the time? I don't see how that would ever happen. That doesn't even make any sense to me. I think if it's going to be revised, it's going to be revised to increase it because it's a problem, because it's happening too often. I think the opposite doesn't make sense.
Our choice.
So I would just like to say that we put all these emphasis on rules and regulations, and the school board has the power to just say we would like to be back in, vote it in, and have it part of our. So we can sit here and argue back and forth between 4 and 8, but we as a school board could vote tonight to wrap up and take off books or put books in. We can do that. We can do that. We have the authority to do that. So I just, when we're all sitting here going back and forth over 5, 4, 8, whatever it is, just understand that that's all great because that's part of the process, but also understand the power that you have as individuals. You can change that. So if somebody really came forward and said passionately that they want this book inside the school district and we're okay with it, we can put it in. Well, I just wanted to remind everybody of that. Don't get hung up on the end. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. I am going to tend toward the longer period of time to save resources in response. So I don't know if that means, I mean, I don't know. Does that mean that you two are not going to vote in favor of the policy when it comes back to it? Like, do we need to completely hash this out, or?
I have no idea. Can't say that.
Okay.
We've made a lot of, water went down their way. Made a lot of changes, and again, a collaborative process. Everybody doesn't get what they want. I'm not getting what I want. So, I hope, something, if it's not completely objectionable, that you would all hope that we don't have to have a 5-0 vote.
That's true. You don't. That is true. I have a couple of, so are you good? I think we're leaning toward Dr. Mullins' recommendation of 8 years as far as when it can be.
7, because.
Okay.
It's going to be a gamble. And we're going to
go
exciting.
12. No,
It's going to be a
kidding.
surprise.
Yes, thank you.
A 12-sided die. Will make this.
Ms. Balfour, if I want to, I'll kick myself if I don't say this. So we really appreciate that everybody's talking about the time and energy of our staff. I do want to say on behalf of the staff, this reflective process is critically important. And when we say time, we just mean it may take a long time because there's a lot of titles, but the time is well spent. So to kind of bridge maybe other perspectives, the time is well spent in really being thoughtful about the material for our kids. So I don't want you to think that staff is not committed to whatever time necessary to have the very best content. And I know our media specialists feel the same way. And that's why this informal process has been super beneficial to sort of revisit the content we choose. And so time is a problem in terms of there's so many hours in the day, but time on this task is really, really important, and everybody feels that way. And I know Ms. Fleck, she's not there anymore.
Yeah,
She's
we lost her.
she feels that way as well. We just may mean it's going to take longer, just every time with titles, but that it is important work.
Right.
And we don't want to shortcut it in any way, shape, or form, regardless of what the outcome may be, may support or may lean to. So I just wanted,
Thank you for that clarification,
having lived
Dr.
with it for
Sullivan.
now for a while, I just wanted to, point that out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
Can
you
I
for
ask
that.
a question? So, again, Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong if I'm putting words in your mouth or misinterpreting what you're saying and thinking. So I think at first, like, you and I are coming from the perspective of, like, the book potentially coming back, not the revisiting of the challenge. So is there any appetite for those to be different from each other? Because right now, as it stands, they're equal. You know what I'm saying?
I suggested a different, but nobody wanted to get with mine.
So, for instance, what I think, again, if I'm wrong, you guys tell me I'm wrong. What I think with and Dr. Mullins, the consideration of our staff's time really would be if it keeps getting challenged over and over and over and over again, right? So that being longer would alleviate that problem. The likelihood of someone coming to the table saying, I'm going to bring back this book that was challenged is probably really, really, really unlikely, which is why I feel strongly about not making it such a long period of time, because it at least provides that opportunity. If someone does want it to be revisited, it can be revisited, but I don't think that would happen as frequently as somebody re-challenging a book.
I think, just to clarify, I think it sounds like what you're saying is that someone would come and challenge to put a book back. There's nothing in any of this
No.
Okay.
Well,
Because
no, that's what they're talking about
the
adding.
re-challenge would be that after the 4 years is over, that someone would put, a media specialist would be allowed, or maybe they wouldn't know about the challenge or whatever. Hope they would, because we're going to mark it. Put the book back out on the shelf, and then a parent finds it again, the books get challenged again and walks through the process
Let me
again.
clarify, because I thought what we said and we agreed upon was that it would have to be revisited. So it wouldn't just end up back on a shelf. It would have to be revisited. So this process here would be, when can you revisit that book? When can you request a meeting again, a committee meeting again to revisit the book? It wouldn't just end up on the shelf and then get challenged again. It would have to be revisited no matter what. And so for me, I feel like that one shouldn't be as long and as restrictive, because it's going to have to go through that process. And the likelihood of that happening over and over again, I personally believe is slim. It's not going to happen often. But the other one is to avoid the constant re-challenging of something that may have said, you know, it doesn't meet the standard, we're not going to go ahead and take this book off the shelf. So I'm just throwing that out there if you guys are willing to separate that or have an appetite for separating it. Because I think we all were kind of coming at it from different sides originally.
Yeah, I see your point there, Ms. Jenkins. I will tell you from my perspective, I think when a book has gone through this process and it's been deemed to be inappropriate for students, I feel like that should be a longer time frame before it can be revisited, just because, like, I mean, it's been reviewed by all of these people and been deemed to be a problem. If a book wasn't deemed to be a problem, then I don't have as much concern about it, I guess. Yeah.
It's almost the same coin, quite frankly. Because if the book was challenged and deemed that it wasn't a problem, and it's on the shelf, and then only in 4 years somebody says, you know what, I'm going to challenge this book again. So we're going through the whole process again. So I think the coin is the same, whether it was denied or not denied. And do we pick a longer time period to prevent our staff being challenged every 4 years? A book, just because whatever. That's kind of how I look.
Right.
So what's a good number for you all? I mean, really, I mean,
Yeah, you guys are the ones that have like been living the process.
8 for both? You guys good with that? Okay. So I have a question on the committee, the district level committee. So it says that at the beginning of each school year, we're going to establish this committee.
where are we?
The 4B challenge.
Thank you.
Yeah,
4B former challenge.
4B. It's on page 60 of the PDF. You go to U and scroll up page and a half. So does that mean that at the beginning of each school year, you all are going to identify school media specialists in each grade band and principals in each grade band and
Yes, we spent a long time talking about that, and we felt we have some similar processes in the district where, you know, people sort of elect themselves to be the reviewers for that year, and so that it's not tied to any bias with a specific book. So it seemed to us to be a good idea. At some late night, so just I just identify, like, amongst the medium specialists themselves, they would nominate, vote, and have, and we would do more than a few in case there comes a need to have a second committee based on volume. We indicated that in there.
Yeah.
But we felt that it would give us the best neutral, not tied to a title. We didn't want to select a title and then select people around that title because it just lends itself to questioning the bias of those that either nominated themselves or were selected.
Right.
That's where we landed.
That makes sense.
The other thing, and I will throw it out there, and you guys can tell me that I've lost my mind. It's completely unnecessary. But I know there's been a significant amount of discussion about the psychological impact of some of the books that the students are being exposed to, and so I'm just curious if it would be valuable to have one of our school psychologists be a part of the panel also, just from the aspect of like being able to interpret.
Well, luckily, the person in charge of them is here, so we'll let her decide.
She's like, let me find some.
like developmental appropriateness for age, mental maturity level based on some of the things coming forward. I don't know.
Except I would say that actually several people who are on the committee would have already, I mean, it's not being a psychologist,
Right.
but all of our media specialists, our
experience.
administrators, our content resources, all, when you get an education degree, a huge part of that is psychology, human development, all of that is part of the training. And of course, parents have some, maybe not a psychology degree at the end of their name. They could, whoever you pick to be on the committee to represent you, but, that we have a knowledge of development too. So I don't know.
I agree with you, Ms.
I
Kimball.
toss that out there. Go ahead and speak, Ms. Moore. I think our psychologists are pretty busy too.
Yes.
I don't know. Is this on? This is on. We'd be happy to support. I know you guys have done a lot of work. I know you've put a lot of thought into this. Our psychologists are incredibly busy. There might be some that this is a passion. Psychologists and social workers both could review any concerns over the mental health of the books in our schools and their impact on students. So if that's the recommendation, we'd be happy to support that.
Would you be satisfied with it being broader, though, to maybe be like psychologist, counselor?
So our social worker.
Yeah, just because, being realistic, I mean, we're limited with our psychologists and the amount of workload that they have. It's something that we definitely would need to consider.
So could we note that we have a
Right.
I'm not in favor of adding anybody else to it. I mean, I understand the point, but I also know that all of the people on the committee could have access to, they can certainly consult with whoever they feel like necessary to get a broader perspective. And I would hope that they would take advantage of whatever resources that a particular book. Honestly, sometimes those conversations, a specific book that maybe talk about abuse or specific triggers to a specific child, that's kind of where our process of a parent being able to flag a book for their child, I see that more coming into play with those kind of situations because, a parent knows that their child, maybe went something in the past and they don't want to trigger them in that way. So I don't know. I think, and plus the other thing is we have a committee of 9, and in case we have a split vote, leaving it at 9. Yeah.
so we're leaving it.
Yeah, I was just trying to find a psychologist to appoint as my representative. All right, anything else on this policy? Anything else that you all need from us on this policy?
Just for your awareness, this policy, the other piece.
Mm-hmm.
All language will change.
Yes, we will see this.
Yes.
While we're on that, is there any Has there been, and we may have to wait to the DOE since down the rules, but has there been any clarification on if what we are currently using, because, you know, part of the new statute says the titles have to be on the website. Is what we're currently using, the method with the access to follow, is that satisfactory?
Yeah.
Okay, so we won't have to make a change that we know of right now.
Correct. And somebody referenced it. Follett is listening and working alongside. I know they have some changes planned that they can't timeline out because of their employment issues, right? So everybody's the trickle down. But Follett has been listening and paying attention and making changes and adjustments to provide more accessibility for parents and information and things like that. So I know they're being a good partner. So at this point, I think it's okay.
And it's my understanding to be a better resource for our media specialists that when they're doing their research for books, right? That's what I'm hearing. Thank you. And to make them consistent between the district. Yeah.
The typo.
And I do want to mention, you know, one of the things that hasn't come up yet that will likely, I don't know, be in a procedure maybe is we have to address cost of the books for the review as well as our employees' time. And so there will be, you know, budget attached. I don't say that negatively or positively, just in terms of information.
Mm-hmm. We can support our. No borrow. If they're in the public library.
Yes.
Perhaps they were pulled from the public library. I don't know. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are now moving on to Board Policy 5630-01, seclusion and restraint of students with disabilities. Does any board member wish to discuss any aspect of this policy?
This is just aligning with the new statute, right? This is aligning, putting us in alignment with new.
So it was. It was in line with the new statute. We've been working on this since October. The reason it took so long is there was some conflict between the way the DOE interpreted the statute, and the way kind of our local law enforcement interpreted the statute. And then about a week and a half ago, the governor signed House Bill 235, which doesn't go into effect until July, but it very much clarifies the language in this policy that it does apply to our school resource officers. So Paul and I spoke before this meeting. We can either go ahead and adjust the language before it comes to you again so that it reflects that on July 1, this is the new language, or we can just approve the policy as it is, which is appropriate, and then bring it to you again as we get closer to July 1 to incorporate House Bill 235.
The most efficient would just be effective until July 1st, 2022, and then effective after, have a separate section. You see that in policies all the time around the state. Then we can just revise it and remove all the stuff that's outdated once we need to review it again in the future, rather than if you just leave it as is, you're going to have to revise it again in the next 3 months.
We will have a deadline.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, and there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is potential that technical guidance might create additional changes to the policy?
There is some rumor out there that it will. House Bill 235 specifically leaves open what our current SEDNet is saying is that there will be, I'll read you the paragraph because it'll be easier to read it and then explain it. Restraint. School personnel may not use mechanical restraint. This paragraph does not apply to This paragraph does not apply to school resource officers, school safety officers, school guardians, or school security guards as described by 1006.12, who may use mechanical restraint in the exercise of their powers and duties to restrict students in grades 6 through 12. So there's two pieces of this. The first piece is that we have to report SROs as using a mechanical restraint. And two, K through 5 was deliberately left out. Currently, what it's being interpreted as is that no K through 5 student can be restrained mechanically, which could be either a zip tie or a handcuff that our law enforcement officers may currently be using. So yes, there may be some challenges to this, and yes, there may be some policy, some procedure revision that comes down, but the way it's being interpreted right now is that K through 5, absolutely nobody, including our school resource officers, can use a mechanical restraint.
Thank you. All right, so we're going forward with Paul's recommendation of up until July 1 and then after July 1?
And I do, much like Jane, I do want to acknowledge my two people sitting way in the back because they've spent hours on this policy. Dr. Kim Bias is our director of ESE programs, and then Jill Manous has invested herself in ensuring that we're protecting and documenting and training and retraining and retraining and retraining as it involves restraint of students with disabilities. So I just want to acknowledge the work that they've done.
Thank you, ladies. We appreciate you.
And then for sitting here 2 hours
Yes,
while we
that
talk
too.
about public comment and book removal.
I was going to ask to go first because I knew the way the other two were going to go.
You should have. Please don't hesitate in the future. Okay. Anyone have anything else for the good of the order? Hearing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.